Hey everyone, thought I'd make a video discussing the topic of clashing frequencies between sounds that use the same frequency range. The example that I'm using today is two recordings of the same synthesizer. I was using a Behringer TD3, which is like an acid synth, and because that's recorded in mono, I want to layer two versions or two different takes to kind of create this stereo. So I'll show you what I've got at the moment. If my disc doesn't over So what I'm going to do for this is I'm going to put a Pro Q3 on both of them. Now, this higher Redux acid, this is essentially a take of the TD3 with Redux on it, so it's got more high frequency content, but the lows and mids are still clashing with my my other version of that's more in the mids. So what I'm going to do is open a Pro Q3 on my Redux. We can see that's roughly what I've got at the moment, and I'm going to open a Pro Q3 on my mids. Now, as I play this, I'm going to have a look at this Acid 3 mid and see how it interferes with the Redux version. So I can go down here and I can pull up other versions of Pro Q3 which I have in the project. So I'm just going to solo this. And we can see here, these are both reacting to this acid sound. So this here is most likely the group of them all, and then these two are the ones that I'm interested in. So I'm going to open up the acid one. We can see it does have a bit more high frequency content there, and we can very clearly see where these are interfering, and they're interfering in these low mids around 200 Hertz. So I'm going to add a bell here to that area that I know is an issue, and I'm going to jump over to my Redux acid. And now the thing to keep in mind is that earlier in the track, these are not always playing at the same times. So I want to create some sort of dynamic EQ that only pulls away the mids when it's necessary. So how to do that? So I'm going to go over to my Redux, and I'm going to grab a envelope follower. So in Ableton 11, you have it in modulators. In Ableton 10, you would have it in max. So here's my envelope follower, and we can see that when I solo this acid lead, it's creating this signal. And this signal is proportionate to the amplitude at a moment, and I can increase the gain to make that more sensitive. We can see there quite clearly. Now, there is filtering going on here, and there's probably going to be parts of this sound that doesn't have any low mids, and therefore we don't have to be as concerned with that clashing, so we don't actually want the envelope to follow the highs as much. So what I'm going to do is create a chain, and we're going to call this signal, and we're going to duplicate it, or let's call this env send, and this is signal. So env send, we're going to put the volume of that to 0 because we don't actually want to hear this, and we're just going to let the signal go through, no worries. I'm going to grab an EQ8, and I'm going to isolate just this area that I know is going to be a problem. I put this on the wrong bit though, haven't I? So this needs to go on env send, and then my signal, I just want to leave this completely dry. So now we hear it. It should sound like there's nothing on there. Yep, that's good. But we can see here, we're going to put this EQ before the envelope. Now keep in mind that this technique could also be used with kick and bass, and in the scenario of kind of specific frequency side chaining, if you were doing that, you would only want to take the click of the kick, right? But for this, we're going to take the low mids of this acid. So we'll now see that when the signal has heavy mids, it's going to generate this signal coming here. So we're going to go over to our main lead now that we don't want to have interfered with. And we've got that point where we know that they're interfering. So I'm going to click configure. And I want that on the gain of this one. So I go now back over to my Redux acid, hit map, and click over to my acid lead, my other acid lead, and go there. So how does this look right now? Well, that's obviously pulling out way too much. And the other thing is when the acid's not playing at all, by default it's at 0. So that's not what we want. What we want is we want negative gain. So we want it to be generally at about 50%, and then we want it to pull away whenever that hits. So we're going to set the lowest point to be where we think it should go down to. Where we think it should start. So we want to start at about here. And then we're going to pull the second part below there. So we've got positive gain, but we've got inversion in the range. So the first value here, we want to set the neutral point where it should be when the other signal is not playing. And the second point here is where we want it to be pushed down to when the signal plays. So if we solo them both, we've got that Redux acid. Yeah, pulling that middle way out of the way when it comes in. However, when it's just the mid playing, we can see no effect. Listen to what it sounds like in the mix. Cool. Now they're not interfering as much. I hope you found this helpful, and hopefully this gives you a new technique to stop elements from clashing with each other.